Dr. Arunkumar. He's the Vice Principal and HOD Professor of Pharmacology at Chettinad Hospital and Research Institute. He's a distinguished medical professional with extensive experience in the field of pharmacology. He holds the prestigious titles of MD, PhD, and FSRP. Dr. Arunkumar currently serves as the Vice Principal and Professor leading the Department of Pharmacology at Chettinad Hospital and Research Institute. His commitment to maintaining ethical standards in medical research is evident through his leadership roles as a chairperson and vice chair of various institutional human ethics committees across renowned healthcare institutions. As the director of the Internal Quality Assurance Cell at Chettinad Academy of Research and Education, Dr. Arunkumar plays a pivotal role in ensuring and enhancing the quality of education and research practices. His contributions extend beyond the boundaries of a single institution, as evidenced by his affiliations with multiple institutional human ethics committees, reflecting a commitment to fostering ethical research practices in the broader medical community. His dedication to advancing medical knowledge, coupled with his leadership in ethical oversight, positions him as a respected figure in the medical and research community in Tamil Nadu, and we are extremely honored to have him on board here.
See, I'm going to talk about the current regulatory scenario for clinical trials in India. Before I start, I think I need to thank AKT Healthcare and their team for inviting me to be part of this global summit. I thought maybe India has introduced these new drugs and clinical trial rules 2019 to give more transparency and accountability in the way clinical trials are handled at the regulatory level. I have prepared maybe about 30-35 minutes presentation, and I'll try to make it as brief as possible. This regulatory framework in India, we call it Central Drug Standard Control Organization, CDSCO. It is with the Director General of Health Services, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare and Government of India. This is the apex body that governs or regulates the drug and device approvals and the clinical trials in India. It is also referred to the Central Drug Authority or Central Licensing Authority. It has the scope of taking over the regulatory control on the import of drugs, approval of new drugs, devices, and also approving or giving NOC for conducting clinical trials with drugs and devices. This is the organogram. I'm sorry for the poor quality. I've just taken it from a website. We all know that the headquarters of our apex body is located in Delhi. It has about 6 zonal offices. We had about 4 zones, north, east, south, and west. And in addition, we have Hyderabad and Ahmedabad. And then we have about 7 subzonal offices, and port of entry happens for a drug or device in the airport or seaport. We have about 13 airport and seaport offices. This is the organogram of CDSCO, but most of the affairs with regard to approvals of drugs and NOC for clinical trials happens in the headquarters itself. It has various divisions. Previously, we used to have not so much clarity on this, but now everything is black and white and fully transparent that, we can see that there are all there are essential divisions in CDSCO to handle various aspects. Starting from BA/BE studies, there is a separate division. Biologics, we have a separate division in the agency. Clinical trial approval is done by a different agency. Ethics committee registrations, we have a division there. Licenses are given by a separate division. And then legal cell and the cell which is handling serious adverse events. Different divisions in CDSCO help us to approach the respective people and then get the relevant applications, filing, and then approvals or rejections, whatever it is. In India, we actually had regulations in Schedule Y of Drugs and Cosmetics Act.
Arun, I'm so sorry. We don't see the slides moving.
You're not able to see the slides, madam?
We can see the slides, but it's only on the first slide still.
No, I think I'm changing it.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the first slide, right? Do you see the second one?
No, we can't see the second slide. It's
Now, do you see the second one?
Yeah, now we see the second one.
Is it in the presentation mode or is it in the slide?
I can see it in the slide. It's moving now. Yeah, sorry.
When I make it to slideshow, do you see the changes?
Yeah, yes, correct.
Do you see the changes, ma'am?
Yes.
I'm sorry about it.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Yes. I think I have tried to brief on the Indian Drug Regulatory Agency, CDSCO, and then what is their role and the organogram stuff, which was referring to head office and zonal offices and port of entries, etc. And various divisions in CDSCO, starting from BABE, biologics, clinical trials, ethics committees, and so on. Now, this is what is about. I was trying to talk about regulations for clinical trial. We had actually Schedule Y of Drugs and Cosmetics Act, 1940, but then it is replaced by NDCT 2019. And at present, Schedule Y, we don't refer it for any purpose except in case we have drugs for animal use. We can refer Schedule Y. Otherwise, I think we have to refer in case of clinical trials. For drugs and devices, we need to refer to New Drugs and Clinical Trial Rules 2019. It was a great initiative by the government of India to make more, to make the entire process, to attract the stakeholders from industry, from academia, and giving them clear-cut guidelines and rules so that, the entire process becomes hastened. In the way when people are in the queue for a long time, they get frustrated. But now with this NDCT 2019, things have become easy for everybody to approach the regulator and then get their approval or NOC, etc. These rules are actually applicable to clinical trials of all new drugs and investigational new drugs for human use and BABE studies and ethics committees. I think all of us are going to play some role in the way we are approaching clinical trials, BABE studies, and also ethics committees. So whenever we have issues or we have processes involved with these stakeholders, it is always good we refer to NDCT 2019 and get what the rule says, so that we also understand and we fight when there is undue delay with regard to the approvals granted by the agencies. Now, NDCT has got various chapters and schedules. To be more precise on it, we have about 13 chapters in Indian Clinical Trial Act and also about 8 schedules. And I will try to give you a brief run through of various important sections and chapters, so that at the end of it, we have some clear-cut idea about how we move forward in the way we are approaching clinical trials. To start with, like many of the acts and regulations, it gives the definitions. Many of these definitions are overlapping and they are present in multiple guidelines, including CFR in US or FDA guidelines or EMA guidelines in Europe, and also GCP, ICH GCP or Indian GCP. All these guidelines and rules always talk about the various terms and definitions. And similar to that, we also have definitions for various terms. Like we define what is a new drug, and the rules describe what is a clinical trial, what is an orphan drug. For that matter, US has a different criteria to call it an orphan drug. In India, orphan disease is something which is seen not more than 5 lakh population. If we see a disease in a very rare subgroup, let's say 1 lakh people out of 100 crore are suffering from a particular disease, it is an orphan disease, and we develop a drug for that, then there is no fee to be paid for the regulator. Absolutely, it is free, and they encourage people to develop orphan drugs. And similarly, I think they are talking about post-trial access. We have a detailed discussion on it later. After completion of the trial, in case if you see benefit to the patients with the IND new drug or investigational new drug, this section allows the patients to continue to receive those new drugs based on the recommendation of the investigator. And the rules define a similar biologic, like biosimilar in some other regulatory agency, we call it similar biologic, like that. There are various important terms that are defined here. I have tried to discuss only 3 definitions here, for I feel that these 3 definitions are very important. In India, what is a new drug? Because many times the acts and rules are related to new drugs. So we should not miss the definition of a new drug. Generally, we see that any drug which is a sustained release formulation, or which is a modified release formulation, or which is novel drug delivery system which is getting used in the drug formulation, then it is always a new drug. Even if it was approved last year, then we try to market it again now, then it becomes a new drug. All biologicals are always new drugs. But then for other drugs, for example, a drug which is not approved by the agency so far, and the drug has been approved for a different claim, and now a different company or an investigator or a sponsor is approaching for a new indication, new dose or new dosage form, then it is a new drug. And fixed dose combinations are new drugs. So these 3 category of drugs, they do not remain new drugs forever. They remain new drugs only for 4 years. And in case if you want to do some research after 4 years, and if you want to do some studies after 4 years, we need not consider those candidates as new drugs. Even for bioavailability and bioequivalent studies, if we conduct BE studies with new drugs, a new drug definition is within 4 years of marketing, it becomes a new drug. If we cross that 4 years, it becomes not a new drug, and hence there are many waivers given in the way we are approaching the trial approvals and ethics committee approval. So I will request all of you to please have this in all of your mind, that in India, a modified release formulation is always a new drug. Never it becomes an old drug from approval point of view. Vaccines, monoclonal antibodies, stem cells, biologicals, all these are new drugs always. In case tomorrow, if you want to market BCG, it is a new drug. BCG vaccine is there for 50 years. But tomorrow, if you want to develop the same BCG, then it becomes a new drug, because it is a vaccine, it is a biological compound, but not ibuprofen. In case if you want to develop it, it's not a new drug, because it was approved for more than 4 years old, more than 5 years, 10 years, 15 years old. And hence, this point is important for us to differentiate a new drug and not a new drug, that give us some allowances in case if we handle olden drugs. And clinical trial, it is defined here, and we know pretty well that it is a human experiment. We try to develop safety, efficacy, and tolerance data with the clinical outcomes and PK/PD outcomes and adverse effects. But this is something which the rule has described it first time, the biomedical and health research. The rule actually differentiates the human research into 2. One is a regulated or regulatory clinical trial. The other one is non-regulatory clinical research. This non-regulatory clinical research is also a human experiment. It is done with some drugs or devices, or with some samples, or with some stem cells, or some with vaccines. But the purpose of this research is not to generate the data to submit it to government agency. And all such human experiments done without the primary objective of submitting the data to government agency, it becomes a biomedical and health research, and it doesn't include regulatory clinical trials. Why they have divided into 2 types? The type of human experiments is that if we do clinical trials, we need to get it approved by the ethics committee, which is registered with CDSCO. Whereas if we do biomedical and health research, there is no need to get approval from the ethics committee, which is registered with CDSCO. Rather, there is a separate body which registered ethics committees. It is Department of Health Research under ICMR. We'll see it little later. So for practical purposes, if all of you are handling both types of research, we need to make sure that the ethics committees are registered with the respective bodies. For clinical trials, it is CDCO that is registering the ethics committee. For biomedical research, it is Department of Health Research, which is registering the ethics committee. And this is again very important for people in ethics committee and people who are doing both types of research. For example, I am doing both regulatory research and academic research. For me, an ethics committee which is registered in both the agencies are very important. And then chapter 2, maybe I'll skip it. Now, this is what I was referring. Chapter 3 and 4, they're talking about ethics committee. Only in India, I see the 2 divisions of ethics committees and registering agencies. Now, this ethics committee is meant for clinical trials and BA/BE studies. It gives, of course, these guidelines are already given in a lot of GCP guidelines and international standards. I'll try to highlight on the deviations or improvisations over the existing guidelines. It says minimum 7 members, like many of the guidelines. It says that we have to have a lay person. Here is the difference. It makes it mandatory that at least one member should be a female member. They are recognizing the importance of females in such committees, and they are making it mandatory that females should be part of ethics committees. And then pharmacologist, legal expert, clinician, and it is insisting that periodic training for ethics committee members are very important. And like all the guidelines, member secretary should be from the same institute and chairperson from outside of the institute. And they are again saying, I think in no other guideline we could see this, 50% of the members should be from outside of the institutes, and only 50% can be inside the institute. So these are some of the improvisations that we see in the existing guidelines when we drafted these ethics committee guidelines for clinical trials, BA/BE studies. And they're also making it mandatory in case if such a committee is reviewing clinical trials, then they need to get it registered, the ethics committee. And there is an application process which is done free of cost by the agency. There is a Sugam portal. We need to open an account in it, and then we need to apply it. And I believe there is no cost involved in it. And they give registration in about 45 days, which is pretty good here. And the validity of registration, it is 5 years here. And before 3 months, we need to apply it to continue our registration. If we miss this target, then once the date is over, we cannot review any more proposals which are falling under regulatory clinical trials. And such committees should store the records for 5 years. So ethics committees, this is very important that we need to remember that it is only for 5 years and it is mandatory. We need to have the documents stored for 5 years, and we need to look for spaces, because if you review about 10-15 projects in 1 year and counting it for 5 years, we will have about 3, 4, 5 cupboards full of documents, and we need to make sure that we have sufficient space for it. Now, this is the other ethics committee that I was talking about, Ethics Committee for Biomedical and Health Research. Now, this committee should be registered with the Department of Health Research. Now, this DHR is a separate department. It falls under the Indian Council of Medical Research, and we need to essentially follow a separate guideline. I mean, this is again a general ethical guideline, right from 1980s. I believe that ICMR keeps publishing this guideline, National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research, involving human participants. So the point is that if we review clinical trials, we need to make sure that the ethics committee is registered in CDSCO, and we need to follow CDSCO guidelines and GCP guidelines. And if we review academic proposals, biomedical research, we need to make sure that we follow this guideline, and we need to register with Department of Health Research. Maybe at some point in time, both the agencies will sit together and will form a unified guideline so that a single registration can be sufficient. And then importantly, NDCT is giving us a detailed note on how to approach the regulator. What are the timelines? What are the forms available? When do they give approval? How do they reject an application? Is there an appealing mechanism present in the system? In case if we receive a rejection letter, can we appeal it? Everything is highlighted in the relevant sections. And this particular chapter gives us the scope to file a clinical trial application. We need to file it in form CT04, and usually they take about 90 working days to decide whether it is approved or whether they need some clarification, whether it is rejected, etc. And any clinical trial application which is approved in India is valid for 2 years. We need to make sure that we start the study in 2 years. Otherwise, after 2 years, we need to again apply it and get it renewed, so that we are not getting lapsed in terms of timelines with regard to NDCT. And there is another incentive that they are giving to people, maybe researchers, maybe companies, maybe pharma companies. In case if we develop a drug, we discover a drug in India, we do basic research, we manufacture, we have plans to manufacture in India, then they are giving such an allowance here, because right now the discovery and development is not so great in India compared to the molecules invented in other countries like USA or Japan or maybe other Western countries. So to motivate the Indian researchers, they have given such an allowance that in India, if we do all these processes, then the timeline is restricted to 30 working days, not 90 days. Even in this 30 days, if we do not receive any communication, then we can take it that the project is approved. It deemed to have been approved by the regulator, and we need to, on day 31, if we have not received any communication, we need to complete form CT4A, submit it to the agency, and then day 32 we can start conducting the trial. So such an initiative taken by the Indian regulator is only for the purpose of motivating Indian researchers to develop and to do basic research in India, so that India is also becoming a big player in the global arena for research and development of new drugs. And we should not forget that the approval given is only for 2 years. Unless we start within 2 years, then we need to go back to them and then get it again renewed. They are only insisting on 2 things when we conduct a clinical trial. One is approval by the ethics committee, which is registered in CDSCO. And we need to communicate this approval to the regulator within 15 working days. The moment we get the EC approval, in 15 days, we need to inform the regulator. And then we need to make sure that the trial is registered in this registry. Of course, there are several registries available. WHO is maintaining a registry. In US, there is a separate registry. But in India, if we do a trial, it is mandatory we have to register in CTRI before we enroll the first subject. If we skip this, they will not enroll the trial, and then it becomes a big problem in enrolling such trials once we start the enrollment. These 2 are important prerequisites for conducting clinical trials in India, in addition to getting NOC, no objection certificate, from the regulatory agency. Now, this act also has made it very clear that the sponsor should be submitting periodic updates to the agency. There are 2 types of updates that they are talking about. One is on subject enrollment. We start the trial, then we keep enrolling the subjects over a period of 1 year or 2 years. Then in every 4 months, we need to submit update to the agency. It is about status of the subject enrollment. And then in the Sugam portal, once in 6 months, we need to prepare a report and then submit a periodic status report of the trial, which is not restricted only for the enrollment, but also related to the investigational products. It is related to adverse events, serious adverse events, anything that we are generating in this 6 months, we need to compile it as a report and then submit in the Sugam port. And they're also talking about different important timelines on it. In case we can terminate a trial at any point in time, and if the sponsor is terminating within 30 working days, we need to inform the agency that we have terminated with the reasons why we have terminated the trial. And in case if there is death or disability, and there are multiple timelines again involved in it with regard to reporting of such events to agency. But once the agency communicates to us that this is the compensation you need to provide to the patient or their legally acceptable representative, then the time given to the sponsor is only 30 working days. If you receive a letter on December 1st, then within December 31st, we need to disperse the amount to the patients. I mean, the regulator has been taking such strong stand because of their experience. Many patients are sending complaints that compensation is not given to them, and hence they have made it transparent. Now the patients are aware of it, the sponsor is aware of it, and the investigator is aware of it, and the responsibility falls on the sponsor that they have to submit, they have to disperse the amount in 30 working days. And a serious adverse event, there are again multiple timelines. Here, the detailed follow-up report should be submitted by the investigator in 14 days. Of course, there is a 24-hour timeline within which the investigator should be reporting the serious adverse event to the head of the institute, to the ethics committee, to the sponsor, and the licensing agency. And in addition to this 24 hours, a detailed report should be submitted in 14 days' time. Now, these timelines are very important, and the agency is not giving us any allowance in terms of we skip some timelines on this. Now, this is what I was referring to it when I started my presentation and talking about some definitions are given by the agency. Post-trial access of the drugs. I mean, clinical trials, let's say phase 1 or 2 or even phase 3, they're all done with new drugs or investigational new drugs. When we have a disease, maybe an orphan disease, maybe any disease for that matter, where we don't have any treatment, there is no alternative treatment available, and we are doing a trial in this condition, the patients are receiving the treatment, and at the end of the trial, if the investigator feels that some patients are getting benefit out of it, then there is always a possibility that the stakeholders are suggested to give this new drug or IND to the patient. Still the investigator feels that the patient should be given this particular medication. This is very useful in oncology, in hematology, in rare diseases where we are supposed to continue the treatment for a long time. It is very important, and I don't know, is there any other regulation which is talking about post-trial access of drugs like how the NDCT 2019 is talking about? And nowadays, ethics committees are insisting. I sit for many reviews of such trials, and we insist that, citing this rule, we insist that the sponsor should be willing to support the patients with post-trial access of drugs. Otherwise, we say that we are not approving such protocols. I've heard that when imatinib as a drug, it's a tyrosine kinase inhibitor. I think it was approved for some hematological malignancy before 40, 50 years. I know one patient who received imatinib when phase 1 or phase 2 trial was done in US. Till today, the company is packing and then sending the medication to that particular patient till today, 40 years, free of cost. Such a commitment, the Indian regulator is also expecting from Indian sponsors and global sponsors, for why they have added this section in NDCT 2019, post-trial access of drugs. And again, I have not seen this in any other guideline or regulation. The NDCT is talking about academic clinical trial. There are many researchers, maybe working in pharmacy institutes, maybe in medical institutes, and doctors who are motivated enough to conduct research in human beings with drugs which are already approved and marketed in, let's say, India. If you want to take it the clinical trial mode, even a new formulation becomes a new drug. Even a new route of administration becomes a new drug. Even dose reduction or dose enhancement becomes a new drug. So the investigators or the academicians were feeling, such restrictions may give hindrance to them in doing research, citing that the agency has given a scope to the academicians to start conducting trials with any drug which is approved already and available in the market. And these academicians are free to do research with regard to new route of administration, new indications, new dosage forms, and new dose levels also. There is no need to get approval from the agency as such. They are categorically saying that there is no need to get permission from CDSCO. All that is needed is to get approval from the ethics committee. And in case if the ethics committee has got a doubt on this, whether the proposal submitted by the investigator falls under academic trial or a regulatory trial, it is not the responsibility of the investigator to get clarity. It is the responsibility of the ethics committee to get the clarity. What do they say? They are saying the ethics committee should write a letter to agency. And if the agency is not responding in 30 days time, it means that the ethics committee can take it as an academic trial and can give permission to the doctor to start the clinical trial. Such a rule or such a statement, we don't see it in any other guideline. Personally, I have not seen it such a encouraging statement to motivate academic researchers to pursue research with drugs and devices. Academic clinical trial. Now, this is what I was referring. If it is a regulatory clinical trial, we need to get approval from the ethics committee, which is part of CDSCO. This academic clinical trial also should be approved by the ethics committee, which is registered in CDSCO, because both are overlapping with CDSCO and clinical trial. It is important. We need to make sure that the committee is registered appropriately in the respective agencies. And then people who are interested or who are pursuing BA/BE studies, the validity period for permission is 1 year. Maybe if you could recollect, the validity period for clinical trial approval granted is 2 years. And the form is CT4. And for Indian researchers who are doing research in India, it is 30 days, and there is a allowance given for auto approval for them. Whereas for bioavailability and bioequivalent studies, if you see here, the validity period for approval is only 1 year. And the form, of course, is different, CT05. Of course, there is a prescribed fees. We will see it later. And this is what I was referring to, compensation. Compensation, finally, they are giving 30 days time to disperse the amount, but the timelines are 24 hours for the initial report, 14 days for the detailed report. For the ethics committee, I think it is 30 days timeline. And then the licensing authority will take about 60 days to get the comments from expert committee. Then license. Sorry. Then they are taking about 90 days to design. To decide decide on this. All they are insisting is within 30 days we need to pay the money to the patients or patients' relatives or legally acceptable representatives. Now this is very important. They are not only talking about only the adverse events or serious adverse events should be compensated. They're talking about in case if there is protocol violation, we need to pay the compensation. In case if you are using placebo and there is an untoward event, we need to pay compensation. Of course, there is a congenital abnormality, we need to pay the compensation. In case if you are using concomitant medication, not a trial medication, if there is an adverse event, we need to pay compensation. We do phlebotomy, we do minor procedures, suturing as a part of the trial. And if there is a problem out of it, then we need to pay the compensation. This is again giving a lot of clarity to people to understand, which will attract compensation from the regulatory agents. And then a Center for Conducting Bioavailability and Bioequivalent Studies. India has got many of the CROs, FDA approved or FDA inspected CROs, and many regulatory agencies keep inspecting Indian CROs for they are doing good work. And such a center, in case if you want to start, we need to get it registered with CDSCO, for which there is an application, and the validity period for approval is 5 years. And we need to maintain the records for 5 years minimum after completion of the study. Now they are making it transparent. Again, we need to open an account in Sugam portal. Then we need to file the application and get it registered with CDSCO. And then to manufacture new drugs or investigational new drugs for clinical trials or BA/BE studies or for testing and analysis purpose, they are giving license in 90 days. And the permission to manufacture is usually vested with 3 years with the extension of 1 more year. So even if we think of doing some research with regard to manufacturing and formulating, we need to file the application and get the license, because we have 3 more years to do full research and then get optimal formulation in our hand. And then to import new drugs for clinical trials, there is a separate clinical trial application form is available, form CT16. Again, they are taking 90 days time to give approval. And here again, the approval is granted for 3 years. Now, this is a license. Many of us, I mean, doing international clinical trials or doing BA/BE studies for international market, we used to import the medications from other countries and then do the clinical trials here. For that, this is the application we need to file, and which has got a validity of 3 years. Within 3 years, we need to import the drug once we get it.
I'm so sorry, Dr. Arun, we'll have to end soon.
Yeah, I'll take only 5 more minutes.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah. And then they're talking about emergency purpose in case if we want to develop a drug or we want to use it an unapproved drug. They're giving permission to government doctors to import the drugs and to use it. Like in COVID, we were using a lot of medications which are not available for trial purpose. We wanted to use it straight away in patients. They were giving us permission, and we were using it. And to go to the schedules, the rule is giving a scope to let us know about various data that we have to submit when we do clinical trials, again overlapping with international guidelines, animal pharmacology, toxicology, and human clinical data. With that, chemistry, manufacturing, and control data, we need to submit it when we file a clinical trial application. And there are 2 processes. In case if we develop a drug for serious life-threatening condition, even with surrogate endpoints other than direct endpoints, they give us permission to even market a drug for a condition for which there is no drug available. And they also motivate us to give expedited review. This is especially for orphan drugs. Even before completing the full clinical trial, if we have promising data, we can ask for expedited review and we can get marketing approval. And then they're talking about fees. Many of you may be aware of it. The respective fees for various applications, it ranges from 2 lakhs for phase 2, phase 3, and 3 lakhs for phase 1. And for a BA/BE study center, it is about 5 lakh Indian rupee. And for compensation with regard to serious adverse events, they have divided into death, disability, and congenital abnormality and other life-threatening illnesses. I think this will be my last discussion. In case of death, this is the formula, and I don't think any regulator has given such a formula to calculate the compensation. They have made it so transparent that the base amount is 8 lakhs, and they are calculating some factors for age and risk factors for the disease severity, and they can get compensation anything from 8 lakhs or 4 lakhs to 40 or 50 or 70 lakhs, depending upon the age and depending upon the risk factor. In case of disability, there is a different formula and they calculate it. And in case of birth defect, usually 50% of the base amount is given in addition to the medical management. Roughly, they will get about 4 lakh Indian rupee in case if they get congenital abnormality. And in case it is a simple admission and then discharge, there is a formula to calculate the compensation amount to be paid. So this is what I think I have it to share. What I feel about making it the current scenario for conducting clinical trials in India. The current regulatory scenario in India, with the advent of NDCT 2019, it is more transparent, it is more accountable, and it is more responsible also. And it is one of the great initiatives by the government of India in attracting all the stakeholders to have India as a destination to initiate clinical trials and to be part of not only Indian drugs, but also global clinical trials. With this, I think I have come to the end of the presentation. And I thank the organizers and AKT team for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share these points with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arun. I think this was a very insightful session wherein we understood the bare basics of regulations. And I also have a lot of requests on the presentation, if it will be okay for you to share.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will send it, madam. You can always use it and share it with all your participants.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much again for your time, for being a part of the summit.
Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you. Bye-bye.